The massive diplomatic hall buzzed with chatter as representatives from across the galaxy gathered. Banners of 100 worlds hung from the ceiling, each representing a member of the Galactic Confederation. Today marked a historic occasion, the introduction of a new spacefaring species. Commander Olivia Winters stood alone at the entrance, shoulders back and chin high. She wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's Defense Force with quiet pride. This was humanity's first step onto the galactic stage. Behind her waited 4 other human officers, each shifting nervously. Species designation 4172. Humans of Earth, you may approach the council, announced the mechanical translator. Olivia led her team forward. The immense chamber fell silent as they walked. Eyes, tentacles, and optical sensors tracked their movement. Most aliens towered over the humans, some standing 3 times their height. "They're so small," someone whispered, not quietly enough. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Zornfall of the Dralaxian Empire, current head of the Confederation Council. His purple scales gleamed under the lights, and his 4 arms were folded in what humans would learn was a gesture of skepticism. "Welcome to the Galactic Confederation," Zornfall said. "We have studied your transmissions for some time. Your achievement of faster-than-light travel qualifies you for consideration as members." Olivia bowed slightly. "Thank you, Ambassador. Earth is honored to join the galactic community." The ambassador's upper eyes blinked slowly. "We have reviewed your technology and military capacity. Most interesting." A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed Earth's largest battleship, the EDF Defender, alongside a Dralaxian cruiser. The size difference was striking. The human ship appeared like a toy beside the alien vessel. Soft laughter rippled through the chamber. "Is this truly your primary military vessel?" asked a representative from the silicon-based Quarn Collective. "One of them, yes," Olivia replied evenly. "We have found efficiency in smaller designs." Ambassador Zornfall made a gurgling sound that the translator didn't catch. Several other aliens joined in what was clearly amusement. "Forgive us," the ambassador finally said. "We mean no disrespect. It's just that, well, your ships are rather adorable. Like toys." More laughter followed. Olivia felt her face warm, but kept her expression neutral. "The Vexhar Dominion grows more aggressive by the cycle," said a floating jellyfish-like being. "Any new member must contribute to our mutual defense." "Can these tiny vessels actually fight?" "Humans have fought wars throughout our history," Olivia replied. "Our ships are designed for combat." "Against other human ships, perhaps," Zornfall said with obvious amusement. "But Confederation vessels operate on a different scale entirely. The Vexhar battlecruisers would not even notice your, what did you call it? Defender." A digital display appeared, showing specifications of Earth's fleet. Numbers scrolled past, detailing weapon systems, shield capacity, and crew size. With each new statistic, more aliens joined the chorus of chuckles and dismissive gestures. "You would need 100 of your vessels to equal 1 standard Confederation cruiser," said a reptilian official. Olivia met his gaze. "Numbers can be deceiving, sir." "Indeed," Zornfall agreed, misunderstanding her meaning. "Nevertheless, all members must contribute. Perhaps your people can assist with supply logistics or medical support." He turned to the assembly. "I move that humans be granted provisional membership, with a probationary period of 1 standard cycle." The vote passed unanimously. Olivia and her team were presented with Confederation credentials and dismissed with polite but condescending nods. As they left the chamber, Commander Winters leaned close to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Ryan Miller. "They didn't ask a single question about our combat tactics or weapon systems." Ryan nodded slightly. "They saw our size and stopped looking deeper." Olivia's lips curved into a small smile. "Their mistake." Above them, the stars twinkled through the transparent dome. The same stars that had watched humanity fight countless wars against itself, forcing them to innovate, adapt, and master the art of devastating efficiency. The humans walked silently back to their tiny ship, leaving the laughing Confederation behind. 3 months after Earth joined the Galactic Confederation, alarms blared across a dozen border worlds. The Vexhar Dominion had launched coordinated attacks against trading outposts and mining colonies. Reports showed the same pattern at each location: sudden appearance, swift destruction, and quick retreat. The Confederation Council called an emergency session. Hundreds of representatives gathered in the Grand Chamber, faces grim. Ambassador Zornful stood at the central platform, his purple scales dull with stress. "The Vexhar grow bolder," he announced. "Intelligence suggests they plan larger attacks soon. We must gather our forces." A holographic map appeared, showing recent attack sites marked in red. Multiple systems flashed with warning indicators. "All member species must contribute to our defense," Zornfall continued. "We will assign positions based on fleet capability." When Earth's turn came, Admiral Jack Carter stepped forward. Unlike Commander Winters at the first meeting, Carter wore a simple gray uniform with minimal decorations. His weathered face remained expressionless as Zornfall reviewed Earth's contribution. "Humans have offered 12 vessels," the ambassador announced, unable to hide his disappointment. "Given their limited capabilities, they will be assigned to defend the supply depot at Proxima Station." Proxima Station was far from any expected battle zones. The assignment was clearly meant to keep the humans out of the way. "We accept the assignment," Admiral Carter said simply. Later, aboard the human flagship Guardian, Carter met with his captains in a secure briefing room. The officers sat around a plain metal table, drinking coffee from standard issue mugs. "They've put us in the corner," said Captain Abby Nelson, tapping the star map. "Classic mistake." Carter nodded. "They think they're protecting us. Meanwhile, what's our actual deployment status?" Lieutenant Paul Diaz brought up a different display. "Fleet is at full readiness. The Nightshade, Phantom, and Ghost are already in position near the Vexhar staging area, running silent. The carriers Horizon and Daybreak are prepared to launch fighter squadrons on your command." "And the Confederation doesn't suspect anything?" asked Carter. Captain William Ellis shook his head. "Their scanning technology relies on mass detection. Our stealth systems make us practically invisible to them. They're still looking for ships their size." "Good." Carter stood and walked to the main viewport. Beyond the glass, engineers in spacesuits worked on a sleek black vessel barely a quarter the size of a standard Confederation cruiser. Its surface absorbed light rather than reflecting it. "Humanity spent centuries fighting itself," Carter said quietly. "We learned that bigger targets get hit first. We learned that speed and stealth win battles. We learned efficiency." He turned back to his officers. "The Vexhar attack in overwhelming numbers with large ships. Classic brute force. The Confederation responds with equally large vessels in defensive formations. Neither side understands what we can do." "What about our assigned position, sir?" asked Captain Nelson. Carter smiled. "We'll send 2 ships to Proxima Station, as ordered. The rest of the fleet will deploy according to Plan Hornet." On the display, tiny dots representing human vessels moved into position around key Confederation systems. Unlike the massive defensive clusters of alien ships, the human vessels spread out in a loose, seemingly random pattern. "Intelligence from our stealth frigates indicates the Vexhar will target the shipyards at Centauri Prime within the week," Carter continued. "The Confederation has positioned their largest defense fleet there, but they're expecting a frontal assault." "And we'll be waiting where they aren't looking," finished Captain Ellis. Admiral Carter nodded. "The Confederation mocked our tiny fleet. The Vexhar will ignore it. Neither understands that humans have been perfecting the art of asymmetric warfare since we first picked up stones against larger predators." He looked at each officer in turn. "We're small, we're fast, and we're silent. And in 3 days, both the Confederation and the Vexhar will learn what that means." Around the table, the human captains smiled. They had been underestimated their entire lives. They were used to it, and they knew how to use it. The massive shipyards of Centauri Prime glowed with activity against the black of space. Dozens of partially built Confederation vessels hung in construction cradles. Below them, defense platforms and patrol ships moved in slow, predictable patterns. Alarm sirens shattered the routine as hundreds of Vexhar warships emerged from hyperspace. Their hulls were jagged and covered with weapon ports that immediately began disgorging energy beams toward the shipyards. Defensive positions, ordered Grand Commander Pelax of the Confederation forces. His flagship, a dreadnought 15 kilometers long, moved ponderously to face the threat. Around it, nearly 50 capital ships formed a protective wall. The battle began badly for the Confederation. Vexhar vessels, though smaller than the largest Confederation ships, still dwarfed most spacecraft in the galaxy. They attacked in tight formations, overwhelming individual defenders through concentrated fire. "Sir, the eastern quadrant is collapsing," reported a sensor officer on Pelax's bridge. "Shipyard sections 12 through 17 are already lost." Pelax's tentacles writhed in frustration. "Where is our reinforcement fleet?" "Still 20 minutes away, Commander." On his tactical display, Pelax watched as the carefully arranged defensive line buckled under the Vexhar assault. He had positioned his forces according to traditional doctrine. The largest ships at the center, medium cruisers on the flanks, and a reserve force ready to plug any gaps. But the Vexhar had simply concentrated overwhelming firepower on specific points, punching through his line with brutal efficiency. "Sir, we're detecting new contacts," the sensor officer suddenly announced. "Small vessels, approaching from multiple vectors." Pelax barely glanced at the display. "Civilian ships trying to escape. Ignore them." "No, sir, they appear to be the human vessels." Now Pelax looked more carefully. Tiny points of light were indeed approaching the battle zone. Human ships, each barely visible against the backdrop of space. He had forgotten they were even part of the Confederation forces. "Poor fools," he muttered. "They'll be vaporized instantly." But something strange was happening. The tiny human ships weren't forming a line or clustering together. Instead, they were splitting up, each one heading toward a different Vexhar vessel. Captain Samuel Grant sat in the command chair of the Swift Justice, a human frigate less than 200 meters long. His hands rested calmly on the armrests as his ship accelerated toward a Vexhar destroyer 20 times its size. "Attack pattern Delta," Grant ordered. "Stay in their blind spots." The Swift Justice suddenly changed course, swinging underneath the massive Vexhar ship. The enemy vessel's weapons couldn't depress far enough to target the much smaller craft hugging its belly. "Precision strikes only," Grant said. "Hit the power junction points we identified." The human vessel fired. Not the wild, area effect weapons the Confederation favored, but precise, focused beams that struck exactly where the Vexhar ship was most vulnerable. Critical power conduits ruptured. Weapon systems failed in cascading sequence. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated. Human vessels darted between the lumbering giants, striking with surgical precision. They moved too quickly for the Vexhar targeting systems designed to track capital ships. Lieutenant Amelia Rivera led a squadron of fighters barely larger than atmospheric craft. Her pilots weaved through the chaos, targeting Vexhar communication arrays and sensor nodes. "Disrupt and isolate," she ordered over the squadron frequency. "Make them blind and mute." On the Confederation flagship, Grand Commander Pelax watched in disbelief as the tactical situation transformed. Vexhar ships began to drift, their engines disabled by targeted strikes. Others fired wildly, unable to hit the tiny craft that swarmed around them like insects, deadly insects with perfect aim. "The humans," he whispered. "They're winning." Within an hour, the Vexhar attack had collapsed. Their remaining ships retreated in disarray, leaving behind disabled vessels and scattered debris. The Confederation had been saved by the very fleet they had mocked. The tiny ships had proven that size wasn't everything. Precision, speed, and strategy had overcome brute force. As the human vessels regrouped, a message came through to all Confederation ships. This is Admiral Carter of Earth Defense Force. Area secured. Requesting permission to pursue retreating enemy forces. On his bridge, Pilax could only stare at the display in shock. Nobody was laughing at the tiny fleet now. The Confederation Council chamber was packed beyond capacity. Representatives from every member species crowded the tiered seating, all eyes fixed on the central platform, where Admiral Jack Carter stood flanked by his senior officers. The room hummed with excited whispers. Ambassador Zornthal approached the podium, his 4 arms held high for silence. The purple-scaled diplomat looked smaller somehow, less imposing than before. "This emergency session will come to order," he announced. "We are here to discuss the recent battle at Centauri Prime and the unexpected role of human forces." He turned to Admiral Carter. "The Confederation owes you and your people a debt. You saved our primary shipyards and defeated a Vexhar fleet that outnumbered and outgunned our defenders. But we require explanations." Carter nodded. "What would you like to know, Ambassador?" "How?" Zornful asked simply. "Your vessels are tiny compared to both our ships and the Vexhar. Your weapons should be proportionally weaker. Your shields insufficient. Yet you prevailed where our mightiest warships struggled." Carter gestured to the woman beside him. "Engineer Maya Patel will explain our technological approach." Maya stepped forward. She wore a simple gray uniform with only a small Earth insignia on the collar. She appeared young to the aliens, barely into adulthood by their standards, yet she spoke with calm authority. "Size is not the determining factor in ship effectiveness," she began. "Humans learned long ago that bigger isn't always better." She activated a holographic display, showing a cutaway of a human frigate alongside a similar view of a Confederation cruiser. The difference was striking. Where the alien vessel had vast empty spaces and widely separated systems, the human ship was densely packed with technology. "We use miniaturization and integration," Maya explained. "Your ships devote approximately 40% of their volume to actual systems. Our vessels utilize nearly 85% of available space." A murmur ran through the chamber. "Impossible," called out a representative from the Corn Collective. "Such density would create heat management issues and maintenance difficulties." Maya smiled. "Yes, it would, using your approach to engineering. We developed advanced heat sinks and modular systems specifically to address these challenges." Admiral Carter stepped forward again. "There's another factor you should understand: humanity's history." The display changed to show scenes from Earth's past: armies clashing, naval battles, air combat. "Humans spent centuries fighting each other," Carter said quietly. "While most species in the Confederation evolved toward cooperation before achieving spaceflight, we perfected warfare against ourselves first." The chamber fell silent. "Our smaller ships aren't a disadvantage. They're a deliberate choice," Carter continued. "Smaller targets are harder to hit. More agile ships can evade rather than absorb damage. And many small, coordinated vessels can attack from multiple vectors simultaneously." Ambassador Zornthal's upper eyes blinked in what humans now recognized as surprise. "You design small ships because they are more effective." "In many scenarios, yes," Carter replied. "We never attempted to match other species in size because we saw no tactical advantage in doing so." Engineer Patel highlighted sections of the human vessel. "We also integrate artificial intelligence into our combat systems. Each weapon is independently targeted rather than fired in broadsides. Our ships identify and strike specific vulnerabilities rather than attempting to overwhelm shields through brute force." A representative from the aquatic Mirosh rose from her water tank. "Why did you not explain this when you joined the Confederation?" Captain Olivia Winters, who had led the original diplomatic mission, answered. "You didn't ask. You saw our small ships and assumed weakness. We saw no reason to correct that misconception." Zornful's scales flushed a deeper purple: embarrassment. "The Confederation has much to learn from humans, it seems." Admiral Carter nodded. "And we have much to learn from you." Perhaps size does matter in some contexts, but not in all. Different approaches have different strengths. Zornful turned to face the assembly. I formally move that humanity be given a leadership role in our defense strategy against the Vexhar. The vote was unanimous. No one was laughing at the tiny fleet now. Instead, they watched with new respect as the humans explained how small could indeed be mighty. The command center aboard the Confederation flagship Eternal Vigilance buzzed with activity. Not the panicked frenzy of previous weeks, but the focused energy of purpose. At the center of the vast chamber stood humans and aliens working side by side around a holographic display of Vexhar territory. Admiral Jack Carter traced his finger along a projected supply route. Their reinforcements must pass through these 3 systems. We'll position our forces here, here, and here. The alien commanders studied the proposed positions with new respect. No one questioned the humans' authority now. Your vessels are too small for sustained conflict, objected General Krell of the Dralaxian fleet. They lack the endurance for deep strikes. Carter nodded. Alone, yes. That's why we'll be integrating our forces. Commander Frank Ortiz stepped forward. His weathered face bore a scar from Earth conflicts, making him look fierce to alien eyes. We're not suggesting you abandon your capital ships, Ortiz explained. We're proposing a new combined approach. The hologram shifted to show Confederation dreadnoughts surrounded by swarms of smaller craft, some human, some newly designed alien vessels based on human principles. Your large ships provide the backbone, Ortiz continued. Power, long-range capability, and sustained operations. Our smaller vessels provide maneuverability, precision strikes, and defensive screening. In the weeks since the battle at Centauri Prime, humans have been placed in charge of planning the Confederation's counteroffensive. The integration wasn't always smooth. Centuries of military doctrine couldn't change overnight. It goes against all established tactics, grumbled Admiral Voss of the Corn. Our captains train for formation combat, not this swarming approach. Commander Ortiz smiled. That's why we've established the Joint Training Program. In a massive simulation chamber nearby, alien officers sat in mock-up bridges while human instructors guided them through new combat scenarios. The aliens struggled with concepts that seemed intuitive to humans: hit-and-run attacks, decentralized command structures, tactical flexibility. Again, called out Lieutenant Nina Garcia to a frustrated Mirage captain. Don't try to overpower the target. Find its weakness and exploit it. The Mirage captain, a being evolved from aquatic predators, hissed in annoyance, but restarted the simulation. This time, instead of directly confronting the simulated Vexhar cruiser, she maneuvered her vessel behind it, targeting propulsion systems with precise strikes. Better, Garcia approved as the simulation showed the enemy vessel crippled and drifting. Much better. Meanwhile, Dr. Natalie Chen worked with communication specialists from a dozen species to solve another critical problem. The issue isn't just language, she explained to her team. It's conceptual frameworks. Humans think in terms of mission objectives rather than strict hierarchy. We need translation software that bridges tactical philosophies, not just words. Her team developed new communication protocols that allowed for rapid coordination between diverse ships. What once took minutes of explanation now happened in seconds, critical in the chaos of battle. As the training progressed, Admiral Carter received regular reports from human stealth frigates operating deep in Vexhar space. Captain Abby Nelson of the Shadow Dancer sent encrypted intelligence about enemy movements and vulnerabilities. Their command structure is rigid, her message noted. They can't adapt quickly to changing conditions. When we disrupt their communications, individual ship captains freeze, waiting for orders instead of showing initiative. Carter incorporated this intelligence into the battle plans. The Confederation would strike not just at Vexhar ships, but at their ability to coordinate. 3 weeks after training began, the combined fleet was ready. It bore little resemblance to traditional Confederation formations. Massive dreadnoughts now traveled with escorts of nimble frigates. Carrier vessels launched clouds of fighters barely larger than shuttlecraft. Command structures balanced centralized strategy with tactical flexibility. As the fleet prepared to jump to its first target, Ambassador Zornful visited the Eternal Vigilance. He found Admiral Carter in a small planning room, rather than the Grand Command Center. The Confederation has existed for 2,000 years, Zornful said. Yet in 1 month, humans have revolutionized our approach to warfare. Carter looked up from his tactical display. We had to learn these lessons the hard way, fighting ourselves. Now we fight together. The combined fleet jumped into hyperspace, carrying the hopes of the Confederation and the innovative spirit of humanity. Space above the Nexus system blazed with weapons fire. The entire Vexhar Armada had gathered for a final stand. Over 300 massive warships arranged in a defensive sphere around their command station. Opposite them, the combined Confederation fleet held position, a strange new formation that mixed giant capital ships with swarms of smaller vessels. Admiral Drar, Supreme Commander of the Vexhar forces, watched the enemy fleet with dismissive eyes. They'd brought their pets, he growled, noting the tiny human ships mixed among the Confederation forces. Prepare all batteries. We will crush them in one decisive blow. On the Confederation flagship, Admiral Carter stood before the assembled commanders. A holographic display showed the Vexhar position. Formidable, but not impenetrable. They expect us to attack directly, Carter said. Their entire strategy depends on it. So we won't. He nodded to Captain Olivia Winters, who had led the first human delegation to the Confederation months earlier. Now she stood in a black combat suit, leading a team of 12 humans and aliens. Operation Needle begins now, she announced. While the main fleets faced each other across space, a single small ship detached from the Confederation formation. The vessel, barely larger than a shuttle, engaged its stealth systems and disappeared from sensors. Inside, Captain Winters checked her team's equipment one last time. Remember, we're not here to fight the entire Vexhar army. We have one job: disable their command coordination. Her team nodded. Among them was a Dralaxian engineer who had volunteered despite his species' traditional reliance on overwhelming force rather than subtlety. He had trained with humans for weeks, learning their approach to warfare. The stealth ship slipped past the outer Vexhar defenses, exploiting gaps in their sensor coverage that larger vessels could never navigate. It docked with the massive command station through a maintenance port, the connection too small to trigger major alarms. As Winters led her team inside, Admiral Carter initiated the next phase. All ships, execute pattern sunburst. The Confederation fleet suddenly split into dozens of smaller formations. Instead of advancing in a unified front as the Vexhar expected, they scattered in multiple directions. The largest Confederation dreadnoughts remained in position, launching waves of fighters and drones. Aboard his command vessel, Admiral Drar snarled in confusion. What are they doing? This violates all standard tactics. His tactical officer struggled to make sense of the enemy movements. They're splitting their forces. We should target the largest groups first. No, Drar ordered. The dreadnoughts are the priority. Ignore the smaller vessels. This was exactly what Carter had anticipated. The Vexhar, like most galactic powers before humanity's arrival, fixated on the largest threats. Meanwhile, Captain Winters and her team moved through the Vexhar command station. They encountered resistance but used specialized weapons designed for close-quarters combat, another human specialty refined over centuries of fighting in urban environments. Deploy the microdrones, Winters ordered when they reached a central junction. Her team released thousands of devices barely larger than insects. The drones scattered through ventilation systems and maintenance tunnels, each programmed to locate and disable specific systems. Outside, the battle had fully engaged. Vexhar warships fired massive energy weapons at the Confederation dreadnoughts, which absorbed the punishment with reinforced shields. What the Vexhar failed to notice was the real attack. Swarms of small human and human-designed vessels slipping between their formations. Captain Samuel Grant, hero of the Centauri Prime battle, led a squadron of frigates through a gap in the Vexhar line. Target propulsion and weapons control nodes only, he ordered. Precision strikes, no wasted shots. His ships darted between massive Vexhar vessels, striking with surgical precision. Other squadrons followed similar tactics across the battlefield, each attacking according to the integrated battle plan, but adapting to local conditions. Inside the command station, Winters reached the central communication hub. Her team secured the room as their microdrones completed their work. Throughout the station, critical systems began failing in carefully planned sequence. Command coordination disrupted, she reported. Phase 2 complete. Admiral Carter received the confirmation and gave his final order. All ships, execute synchronized attack pattern Omega. The Great Hall of Unity on the Confederation capital world had been transformed. Where once the ceiling displayed only the banners of founding species, now a new flag hung prominently among them, the blue and green emblem of Earth. Below it, representatives from across the galaxy gathered to celebrate victory and recognize those who made it possible. Ambassador Zornfall, no longer condescending but genuinely respectful, stood at the center podium. His purple scales gleamed under ceremonial lighting as he addressed the assembly. One cycle ago, we welcomed humans to the Confederation with skepticism, he admitted. We saw their small ships and dismissed their military capability. Today, we gather to honor the vision that saved us all. The defeated Vexhar Dominion had surrendered unconditionally 3 weeks earlier. Their once feared armada lay in ruins, their territories now under Confederation protection. The cost had been high, but far lower than any military expert had predicted. Admiral Jack Carter and Captain Olivia Winters stood side by side as Zornfall placed the Stellar Medallion, the Confederation's highest honor, around their necks. Behind them stood the human officers who had led the revolution in space warfare. The victory belongs to all species who fought together, Carter said when invited to speak. Humans didn't win this war alone. We simply contributed a different perspective. After the ceremony, representatives gathered around technical displays where human engineers worked alongside alien counterparts. Engineer Maya Patil guided a group of fascinated Quarren scientists through diagrams of new hybrid ship designs. We're combining the power generation capacity of Dralaxian systems with human miniaturization techniques, she explained. The result is vessels 40% smaller than traditional designs, but with equivalent capabilities. Across the hall, Commander Frank Ortiz led senior military officers through tactical simulations. The aliens no longer questioned human methods, but eagerly absorbed the lessons of flexible command structures and adaptive strategy. Size isn't everything, Ortiz repeated, a phrase that had become something of a mantra. What matters is how effectively you use what you have. The phrase appeared everywhere, on training manuals, engineering blueprints, and even ceremonial banners. What had once been mockery had transformed into a philosophy embraced across the Confederation. In the shipyards orbiting the capital, the transformation was physical as well as philosophical. New vessels under construction bore little resemblance to traditional designs. Gone were the excessive empty spaces and redundant systems of old Confederation ships. The new fleet combined the best elements of all member species, the power of Dralaxian engineering, the sensory capabilities of Quarren technology, and the efficient design principles of humanity. Ambassador Zornfall found Admiral Carter alone on an observation deck, watching the construction. I owe you a personal apology, the ambassador said. I was among the loudest voices mocking your tiny fleet when you first arrived. Carter smiled. It's a natural assumption. Throughout human history, we've associated size with power. Yet you overcame that thinking. We had to. Earth is small compared to many populated worlds. Our resources were limited. We learned to do more with less out of necessity. Zornfall's 4 arms gestured toward the shipyards. Now the entire Confederation learns this lesson. The next generation of officers will train at the new academy on Earth. They will learn to think as humans do. The Earth Defense Academy had become the center for military education throughout Confederation space. Young officers from 100 worlds studied human history and tactics alongside the technical aspects of warfare. As they spoke, a formation of ships passed the viewport, a training squadron of the new Joint Fleet. At its center flew a vessel bearing the words, "Tiny but terrible," on its hull, the unofficial motto adopted by the combined forces. The Vexhar couldn't understand what happened, Zornfeld remarked. Their after-action reports show complete confusion about how they were defeated. Admiral Carter watched the ships execute a perfect synchronized maneuver. They made the same mistake you did initially. They thought size determined capability. They never looked deeper. A mistake no one in the Confederation will make again, Zornfeld promised. The ambassador extended his primary right hand, a gesture of true equality among his people. On behalf of all species, thank you for teaching us that sometimes the smallest voices speak the greatest wisdom. Carter shook the offered hand, a simple human gesture now adopted throughout the Confederation as a symbol of cooperation.